much about the mayor's race in L.A., the congressional races throughout the Bay Area, and, of course, the governor's race here for the state of California. Lots to vote on and lots for voters to consider, not even just yesterday, but for the November election. So can we talk about just how voters can just stay on top of some of the information that is being poured into them and be best educated on some of these candidates that they need to pay attention to?
Well, local news is probably the best resource.
That's what I was hoping you'd say.
You got it. But no, I think there is a lot of information out there about these campaigns. I think each candidate is really pushing themselves into every form of advertising, whether it's traditional or new forms like social media and memes even are becoming a big thing. I think people are finding out about these races even outside of the traditional news channels. And so people just have to make sure to also watch those interviews with the tough questions with journalists, because you can get a lot of information there.
We just heard from Steve Hilton, who is leading the race right now for California's governor's race, for the seat of California governor. He talked about voters being very generous to the Democratic Party, who have been entirely in power in California for the last 16 years, saying that change is coming now that a Republican is headed into this runoff election in November. What do you make of a Republican candidate not just being part of the runoff, but leading the ticket right now?
It's pretty extraordinary what Steve has accomplished, and he's a really smart guy. He's guest hosted Fox News, and I've been on as a guest, and every forum he can get himself into where he can communicate extemporaneously, off the cuff, share all the facts, share all the data, and really bring the case to his opponents, he's going to shine. The really tough thing for him is California is, of course, such a deep blue state that you need Democrats to win. So yes, you need the Republicans, yes, you need the independents, but you need the people who hate Donald Trump and don't like what's going on in national politics, but they also know California is a mess and they're hesitant to give Democrats another try. And so if he sticks to the California issues, which he's been pretty good at doing, then he might have a shot. But of course, it's a very high bar there in my home state. I was born and raised in Southern California, so I know it well.
So that's the governor's race. And let's talk about Congress, because there are a lot of interesting little nuggets there. But most importantly, it seems like we have this changing of the guard, this torch that's passing. No more Nancy Pelosi in Congress, who had been there for 30, close to 40 years. No more Eric Swalwell, who had been in Congress since about 2013. No more Dianne Feinstein in the Senate, who'd been there for 30 years. No more Barbara Boxer before that. We have so many candidates who will be coming into these seats for either the first time, maybe even the second or third time, but no more of these long-term politicians representing California in Congress. What is going to be different about California's representation in both the House and the Senate?
So I have a little bit of a different take on this. I really appreciate those long-standing careers in Congress with some of the older, more traditional, more moderate Senate and House members that, get a lot of flack from the far right and the far left, but they're the ones that make and break the deals. They're the ones who know how the machine works, and they can often have this institutional knowledge that we don't appreciate till they're gone. With that said, Dianne Feinstein's a legend. She cast her last vote in the Senate just hours before she died. I can't even believe that she did that. So you're talking about people who are irreplaceable, both in California history and in congressional history. But, California's been sort of at the forefront of whatever change is happening in Congress, because there's just simply so many seats, there's so many people, and it's such a huge chunk of the country's economy, but also the country's challenges. California has anywhere between a quarter and a third of the country's homeless population, no matter how you slice it. That's deeply concerning. They also have the financial resources and the economy to compete with most other small countries in the world. So you're talking about immense challenges that perhaps smaller states that get less attention don't face. And so I think that, I think candidate quality is usually pretty high in California. It's really hard to win there. People are are usually pretty experienced, and you've got to have a built-in following, and you have to have substantial resources.
And to your point, it's not like Nancy Pelosi was voted out. She's retiring.
Exactly.
Eric Swalwell resigned. He wasn't voted out either. So a lot of these long-term candidates, they ended their careers in their seat, and this next generation is being voted in because the seat is now vacant. Do you expect these newcomers, whoever replaces Nancy Pelosi, whoever replaces Eric Swalwell, and then some of these new senators like Adam Schiff, who just started in this last election cycle, do you expect those candidates to hang on to those seats for generations and decades?
You know, once you're in as an incumbent, the following election's your toughest, especially in the House. And then once you make it past that second election, it's really actually kind of hard to get moved from your seat. You're just trying to stay in Congress, acquire power, you know, get these committee seats, gain more prestige, more voting power, learn who your allies are, and bring resources to your district. But that first election is very hard. And I think Nancy Pelosi is going to have a pretty heavy say in how some of those races shape up. Just because she's not going to be in Congress doesn't mean that she's not enormously influential in the Democratic Party. A lot of leadership looks to her for advice and will continue to do so.
You know, the candidate that she endorsed, Connie Chan, is right now in second place in that election to represent California's District 11. Scott Wiener did not receive the endorsement of his longtime mentor, which I feel like was shocking to some, not so shocking for others. But did you expect Connie Chan's numbers to be a bit higher than Scott Wiener because of that endorsement?
You know, endorsements are very difficult. Sometimes party leadership makes an endorsement and it's the person that would have won anyway. Sometimes they make a surprise and they endorse someone because they want to give them a boost. So it's really hard to measure the impact of these sorts of things. What it will do for Connie Chan is it will bring a lot more attention and resources to her campaign. And I don't know if that'll be, you know, enough to be victorious, but of course you want that Nancy Pelosi endorsement. That's a tough get, and it'll mean a lot.
We're running short on time, but I do want to get your take on the LA mayor's race, because that seems to be the most fascinating of the bunch right now, this election cycle.
Yeah.
I mean, Spencer Pratt has certainly made a name for himself politically in this time around. And I've been saying this throughout the coverage of our live stream so far, that the last time that an incumbent LA mayor was forced to a runoff was back in 2005. And back then, that incumbent actually lost the election. Karen Bass, we know, won her runoff just 4 years ago, so she has the experience of these elongated races. So how do you see this shaping out in November?
It's very tough. I mean, Karen Bass is going to get all those Nithya Raman votes, or at least most of them. And so Spencer Pratt needs to, again, you know, sort of like statewide, not only eat into the independent vote. He needs most of those people. He needs the few Republicans in LA. And then he needs the Democrats who are really upset with the status quo. And I think he has an angle here, both through the dog abuse that's going on Skid Row. He's been endorsed by pretty much every animal rights organization. Yes, the fires are a huge issue for him and natural resource management, but also the homelessness issue. I mean, these issues used to be things Democrats owned and they won on when they campaigned on them. So if he attacks the left from the progressive side with progressive values, I think there is an avenue for him, however narrow it may be, but he needs to stay away from Donald Trump, stay away from national politics, and talk about the things LA cares about, which he has done a great job of.
Yeah, he's been very clear in making sure that his campaign is nonpartisan, despite him being a registered Republican. Big win for Spencer Pratt here in forcing this runoff. We'll see officially what those numbers look like and who will be on that ballot in the general election in November. But Lauren Wright, I want to thank you for your time joining us here from Princeton University. Thanks so much.